Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Plotlines. I'm your host, Connor. And before we start our episode today, please like, share, comment, and subscribe if you like what we're doing here on this channel. And please join our Discord to join our discussion. The link for that is down below. Now, with me today is Kaitlyn Facista from Tea with Tolkien. She is a wonderful Twitter personality, as well as has a great podcast and as well as her website is fantastic. All things Tolkien. There's probably nobody better on the internet at the moment. So welcome, Kaitlyn.
Thank you.
So it's really great to have you here. Really, your part on the internet is just a very great place to find everything Tolkien. And thank you for all the work you do.
Oh, thanks. Oh, happy to do it. It means a lot to me. So it's fun to share Tolkien with the rest of the world.
I think so. I got into Tolkien. It wasn't that long ago when I read Lord of the Rings, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and you were one of the first people I found sort of talking about it.
No way.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, I have this shirt that you made as well. So
yes,
that I'm wearing. So thank you for
that
creating
shirt.
that. I think my mother got it for me as a present one year.
Aw, that's a good mom.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So we're here to talk about elves, all things elves. One of the most interesting parts of Tolkien's legendarium, given the fact that elves don't exist. Or do they?
Yeah, anymore, I guess.
Yeah. So I want to sort of pick your brain about elves. So let's start with what do you think the role of elves is in Tolkien?
I would say first and foremost, I think that they were meant like as a vehicle for Tolkien's invented languages, because he started out wanting to create these languages, and then you can see him like, oh, well, I better build a story for this language. And okay, I made Elvish, so we need elves. So I imagine that that's kind of how it ended up kind of coming out. But I also think they're really the main players in all of the world's history, because they're the ones who are living through most of it. And so it's easier for Tolkien to work with these grand stories spanning thousands of years when he has characters who also live, who can live through the whole thing. And I also think they're the ones making many of the world-changing decisions and kind of determining the course of the history of the world. So they're really just like the ones in charge, at least for a lot of what we get from Tolkien.
Yeah, I mean, they're really the first characters that are really like, I mean, they're human-esque insofar as they are, imperfect and, but they also are immortal, and that it's just interesting to me that he is able to make it so relatable of characters, even though they're immortal. I mean, they do die, or they can die, I guess. So how do you think he did that?
I feel like he wanted them to be, like you were saying, like they are set apart from humanity, but at the same time, they do have a lot of the same traits as humanity, where they'll make mistakes, they'll cause problems. They actually cause a lot of problems in the Silmarillion. But through their own journeys of life, I think that a lot of Tolkien's own philosophy is kind of revealed through their stories, and the world is just shaped along as they're going.
Yeah. Do you think Tolkien had to write the Silmarillion kind of in that I kind of think of it as biblical-esque insofar as it's not as detailed or not as not like a novel in the normal sense, because he's dealing with immortal beings that their life stretches so long?
I feel like that's probably part of it. I feel like he had to take such a, I don't know what you'd call it, just like he looks at everything in such a cosmic scale, at least for most of the Silmarillion, because everything that's happening is so big. And when you get to the Lord of the Rings, you get to zoom in a lot closer and you get to meet characters and know them in a different sense. But with the Silmarillion, it's like the whole world is being made and then it's being changed and there's giant battles and wars happening. So he does kind of have to zoom out in order to really capture what's going on.
Yeah. He does though make the characters in the Silmarillion very likable, even when you're sort of looking at them from sort of this cosmic area, I guess, or this cosmic
because he'll stay far out but then you can see him like zooming right in when something important is happening, and he wants to describe it in detail and you're like suddenly weeping out of nowhere.
Yeah, I feel like that is kind of the best description of what the Silmarillion is. I feel like people have a hard time sometimes getting into it because they feel like it's so different from Lord of the Rings, but you have such beautiful moments within it, just like Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they come as more of a surprise too because you weren't expecting them a lot of the times, and like you're just like, he'll just drop the most beautiful sentence you've ever read out of nowhere and you're like amazed.
Yeah. Do you think it's significant that they're the firstborn of Eru Ilúvatar, the god of the universe?
I think it makes sense when you think of the way that he kind of wanted this own mythology to be a part of our own mythology. And so if you think about it, the firstborn, the elves, and they aren't a part of our world anymore. And now like the elves have their time and then they start fading out. And then it's the time of men. And then we're kind of still in the time of men. And so in that sense, like that, you can see that he wanted it to be somewhat of a mythology for our own world. It makes sense, but it also makes sense because I feel like they're the ones who have been given more responsibilities, I guess, because of their greater lifespan and the fact that their lives are kind of tied to the earth itself. Whereas with men, they die and it doesn't really go into any detail with what happens after their death. But for elves, they have a lot more responsibility and powers, and they kind of do operate as like a firstborn child in that sense.
They also can, they're kind of holding the ship together in some way. Even
they're supposed to be.
Well, yes, they're a disappointment, I would say, a number of times, but they hold the ship together in some ways. And even as you get into the age of men or near the age of men, they're still holding everything together. But they do act sort of as mentors to man.
Yeah, I almost imagine their intended role was to be like shepherds of men, but they, in most cases, ended up failing. And I think a lot of that, our Discord read the Silmarillion this summer, and a lot of our discussion came back to the question of whether or not it was right for the Valar to summon the elves to Valinor when they did, because in a sense, I see that as them pulling the elves away from where they were meant to be and kind of what they were meant to be doing, because I kind of imagine like what would have happened if they would have stayed. And then when the men came, if they would have been like helpers to them and teachers to them. And instead they're like off having wars of their own. So I kind of wonder how the fate of men would have been different if the elves would have just stayed put, which is kind of the fault of the Valar. So it's like a big complex thing to think about, but I don't know. I've been thinking about that a lot.
Word from our affiliate, Bishop Sheen Rosaries. You've probably worn through the chain of your cheap plastic rosary. Other rosaries simply can't stand up to the wear and tear of everyday life. Bishop Sheen rosaries are made of solid metal beads and paracord to withstand any condition, and are backed with a lifetime warranty. Upgrade your rosary to a Bishop Sheen rosary made to fit your lifestyle, or buy one for a friend. Each rosary sold supplies 2 weeks of food for a school kid in Uganda. You use the exclusive link down below to help support our efforts here at Plotlines. The link will take you to sheenrosaries.com. Be sure to use the code Plotlines10.
Well, do you think they would have had sort of the knowledge they would have needed to pass on if they hadn't been brought to the Valar?
Yeah, I don't know. It's possible, like, if the Valar could have like come to them and maybe taught them there instead of, because I feel like the Valar bringing them to Valinor right off the bat was like they were trying to take them and hide them away from all the dangers, which as a parent, like I can totally relate to that. But at the same time, like you have to let people grow up and you have to let your kids learn how life can be and, learn lessons along the way and grow up. And so I imagine if the elves would have had a different opportunity, because I think they were supposed to go to Valinor at some point, but I kind of wonder if they went too soon.
Do you think
But
that
this is just all in my head. Yeah, this isn't like supported by anything, I don't think.
No, I like the sort of the I don't know. I like the idea. I also think. Do you think it was caused more by the marring done by Morgoth?
Yeah, I mean, everything he did definitely caused problems and messed things up. So if he could have just not done that, things would have been wonderful. But I don't think he was maybe the only one to blame for kind of the way things turned out, especially with Feanor and all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also think the Valar are kind of, or so the elves are like halfway in between men and the Valar. They're sort of they've got sort of traits of both.
Yeah.
In some ways. Do you think, or would you say that elves are greater than men?
Say greater, like greater in the mind of Iluvatar. I wouldn't imagine that he would hold one or the other above each other. But I do feel like I said before, like they've been given different gifts, and the gifts of the Eldar kind of come with more responsibility just because of their prolonged lifespan and their I don't know, I think they've just been given more. So the whole Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility kind of thing. So I wouldn't say they're greater, like I wouldn't want them looking down on men, even though they kind of end up doing that anyways. I don't know if that's quite right for them to do that.
Yeah. So, and would you explain where the rivalry comes from with their between the elves and the dwarves?
Yeah, so I think that really comes down to the creation of the dwarves, because the children of Iluvatar are elves and men. And then you have Aule, one of the Valar. He kind of gets impatient waiting for the elves to awaken. And so he goes off and creates a people of his own, and he creates the dwarves. But as he's not Iluvatar himself, he doesn't have the ability to create life itself like Iluvatar does. And so what he creates are kind of like, I imagine like a video game characters, when you're playing your video game, the character just stops moving. And so Iluvatar kind of shows him like, what have you done? Because now these creatures are completely reliant on you. But then Iluvatar, in his kindness, he does end up giving them like a fullness of life, and he adopts them as children of Iluvatar. But I think there's kind of always this tension because they weren't like a part of the original plan. And so that it's a little bit weird for the elves and men, maybe just because there's something so different. And then the dwarves did have to kind of wait a while longer because Iluvatar said that he needed like his original children to wake up first. So I feel like that's kind of at the root of everything, but then they kind of just always have a strained relationship. They can profit off of each other and kind of get along when they need to, like a business working relationship, but then they don't really ever fully trust each other that much.
Yeah. It's interesting. Do you think it has to do with sort of Aule's sort of his interests clashing so much with all the other Valar who taught the elves?
Maybe. And I think that also the way that Aule acted in becoming impatient and wanting something of his own and kind of going off onto his own to create something is very similar to the way that Melkor did in the Ainulindale. And so there's really a lot of similarities in those two actions. But then with Aule, we have like a really humble repentance. And, you know, when Melkor is confronted, he just gets more mad and more set in his ways. But then when Aule is like realizing what he's done, he's immediately, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, you know, I'll destroy this. I want to repent. And so that's the difference between the two of them, but they still kind of started out very similarly in a way.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, Melkor is much more powerful than Aule. Do you think
Mhm.
sort of that that power, that ability went to his head, which it explains sort of the difference of a response between the two Valar?
It seems like it, because he was definitely more prideful, because he knew that he kind of knows he's better than everyone else. And he is impatient, and he thinks he knows better than Iluvatar. And that's why he's, even before the music, he's going out into the void trying to find something that isn't ready yet. And he's not able to find it because it's not part of the plan. And so he's just becoming so impatient and prideful, and he wants it now, and he wants it how he wants it. So that just doesn't really end very well for him.
He's like the girl from Willy Wonka.
Yes, he's like, Daddy, I want it now.
Yes, that is Melkor. Which is goofy. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, I can totally see him. Like, Melkor is like the kind of Valar who like throws tantrums and is just like screaming and bugging everyone else, and they're in the playground and he's just knocking their blocks over. And
exactly. But the blocks are the world, and
they're like mountains.
Yeah, but he's destroying mountains instead of blocks. But yeah, that comes like sort of another. It's sort of related to with great power comes great responsibility. You know, he has the greatest of the powers of all, because he has. Is it right? He has the powers of all the Valar.
I don't. I would have to double check that. I've not heard that before. But if I feel like they all had a part to play in the song, so it's maybe like he could have had the leading part in the song. I'm not exactly sure on that.
Or maybe it was the sort of he has like part of every he has a little bit of everyone's power, sort of, so to speak. Like,
yeah, that sounds.
Yeah, I can't remember. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but
no, I feel like once you get into like, I feel like I know the Silmarillion pretty well, but then once you get into like Unfinished Tales and like the history of Middle-earth, it's where things get a little fuzzier for me.
Yeah, I don't think I've read either of those actually. So
sometimes I think it's better if you haven't, because then you just have like one canon to stick to. And once you start reading all of his drafts and changes, and then you're just like, what's going on here? Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
I've read the 3 books that Christopher, the 3 like what is it? The Children of Húrin, the Beren and Luthien, and what's the Fall of Gondolin. So I've read those, but so in that way I can get some things a little confused, because there's multiple different versions of each story.
I know it kind of can cause confusion as you're going. I definitely lose track of things.
Yeah. But so, you know, there these different types of elves too. So elves are not sort of this one sort of culture, or one sort of a group of peoples, because they separated multiple times, and because they were even just different different from each other when they were created. So will you explain some of the differences or the different types of elves?
Sure. So like we were talking about before, all the elves awakened together, but then when the Valar summoned them to come to Valinor, a lot of them refused the journey, so they just stayed. Some of them accepted, but then got kind of lost along the way. And then some of them made it all the way to Valinor. Then some of them stayed in Valinor. Some of them went back to Middle-earth. And so you have this massive splintering of elves. And as they go, you know, they're growing in their own communities and they're finding different things they like. So you've got, you know, certain elves who love building ships. You've got other elves who live in the woods. Other elves who kind of like the Noldor, they're kind of like the main group of elves that we deal with in the Silmarillion. And they are really into like craftsmanship and building because they are kind of favored by Aule, who is the craftsman of the Valar. And so it kind of is just everyone splintering off into different groups. And then over thousands of years, you can imagine how they would adapt and grow. And this would lead into very distinct groups of elves who all have different talents and strengths and personalities and everything. So it's kind of just like everyone's going everywhere.
Yeah. No. And creating conflict.
Yes, they're all getting into battles and killing each other, and it's not going so well for them.
Yeah. No, it's sort of this. The Dark Elves are kind of the strangest part to me. Is sort of you don't really get much of them, and I'm trying to think. There's one. Is there only one Dark Elf that really gets attention? Or
the only one I can think of is Aol.
Yeah.
And he's not a good guy.
Yeah, he's a problem.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the thing about, I feel like with the elves like that, they kind of live a more hidden life. And so they don't come into the great tales as much. So we don't really get too much about them.
Because I was thinking just, you know, how you were thinking of, you know, whether or not they should have gone so early. It's just interesting to look at them to see, but we don't really get to look at the Dark Elves too much. And the Dark Elves, I mean, they're not there's nothing inherently bad about them like there is in like Norse mythology or anything like that.
Yeah, I think they're just called the Dark Elves because they dwell in the dark.
Yeah, and they haven't seen the light.
Yeah.
Though the Grey Elves are kind of a mix of the two.
Yeah, and I feel like with all of that, it can get really confusing too. Like I usually have a chart in front of me whenever we're looking at, like especially when you get to the sundering of the elves in the Silmarillion, you're like, well, who's going where and what are they called? You've got the Calaquendi and the Moriquendi, and like what's going on here?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's even groups within those two. You know, there's the Grey Elves. I think are the maybe. But do you think they're kind of what would have been ideal, sort of? You know, because they seem to live in harmony and lived well in Middle-earth with sort of with a Maiar living amongst them with what was
Thingol.
With Thingol and Melian, right?
Melian, yeah.
Yeah. So like
I feel like they do seem to be doing, I mean, in general, they're kind of holding their ground and keeping Middle-earth safe, at least in their own realms. So it's possible that could have been what the other elves were supposed to have been doing, but I guess I couldn't say what Tolkien was thinking.
Yeah, no, it's just interesting because for whatever reason when you were talking about them not going to going to Valinor, I didn't think about the Grey Elves are kind of somewhat of a mixed bag. You know, you have Thingol who had gone and seen the trees, but then didn't come back, but he is staying with, you know, he marries a lesser, what are they called? The lesser.
She's a Maiar.
Yeah,
they're the lesser, kind of like the Valar, but to a lesser degree.
Is there a name for the two? The Valar and the Maiar, or is that?
Yeah, they're all called the Ainur.
Okay.
And then the ones who chose to enter into the earth are called the Valar and the Maiar.
Okay.
So the ones who are still like up in heaven are still called Ainur.
Okay. So kind of lesser Ainur.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. So and she sort of embodies the light of the trees, and he's basically mesmerized by that. Which that meeting is very interesting. What do you think about Thingol and Melian meeting?
I think it's kind of funny because Tolkien writes, like when they meet, they're kind of just like frozen in an enchantment for like, I forget how long exactly, but it's like a couple hundred years, maybe it's like 200 years. So I think that's funny. And I also like how it kind of mirrors the story of Beren and Luthien, which mirrors the story of Tolkien and his own wife, where they meet and there's just this enchantment and you're kind of just like frozen in time because it's so wonderful.
Yeah.
And I also love about that story, though, the way that all of Thingol, all of his people are out searching for him and they can't find him. And then they're unwilling to leave Middle-earth because they can't find him. And kind of the result of that is them staying there and kind of everything that goes with that. So it's such an interesting story. And I love the way that it kind of takes the way that the story was going and then it's like a sudden turn. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it seems very fairy tale-esque too. So
Yeah.
like it feels very much kind of I don't know, Sleeping Beauty or something like that.
Yeah, it's very enchanting.
Yeah, and that sort of, you said it comes back like over and over. The same a similar sort of event happens to with Beren and Luthien, and Aragorn and Arwen also have something of a similar encounter. But this I don't know, it's the fact that his people won't leave without him is a curious thing, because there's so much. I mean, he was the king of that group. What group was that? It's the seafaring people.
The Teleri.
The Teleri, yeah. And is it his brother takes the reins?
Yeah, because his name was originally Elwë, and then Olwë becomes the king and takes them over eventually. But still, even after that, some people still don't want to go. So then there's a whole group of them that remain behind.
Yeah. Do you think that had any negative effects, the splitting of the Teleri?
I don't know. I mean, I would imagine that it would have been best for all of them to stay together. But I also think, I don't know, it seemed like a lot of good came from him staying, especially because we got Beren and Luthien after that. And they kind of also changed the course of the whole world. So I don't know if the role of Providence came into that at all or what, but in general, it seems like it ended up being pretty good.
Yeah. So, who are your favorite elves from the Silmarillion?
This is such a hard question. I was thinking about this morning, and I would think it would have to either be Fingolfin or Finrod, and I don't know if I could choose between the two of them.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
do you want to give just a quick summary of the two of them?
Sure. So Fingolfin, he is the half brother of Feanor. So after Feanor's mother died, his dad remarries, and then he has two sons. Fingolfin is one of them, and they never get along because Feanor is kind of mad that his dad got remarried, and there's all this tension. And eventually, fast forward quite some time, Fingolfin is the first High King of the Noldor in Beleriand, and he has a lot happen in his story, but the way that his story ends is this duel with Morgoth, and it's just like the most epic fight battle scene in the whole story, I would say. If you look up illustrations of this, Morgoth is standing like towering over him, and his bravery and his valor is just like, it gives you chills reading it. It's such an incredible story.
Valar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Finrod is the brother of Galadriel. And I think he has a really cool relationship with the dwarves, which a lot of elves, it's like almost like a lot of elves just don't get it with the dwarves, but he gets it. And so he's able to make a lot of progress with them and form a lot of strong relationships. And then he also has a really strong relationship with men too, because of his whole storyline with Beren and Luthien, and his ultimate death saving Beren, which is crazy when you think about the way that men are looked down upon by the elves, that an elf would sacrifice his own life for Beren is really, really cool and different when compared to a lot of the other elves. So he also has just like a super cool story too.
Yeah. Doesn't Fingolfin get like draw blood on Morgoth? Isn't that
Yeah, I think what it was is I might be mixing this up. He either gets his face scratched or stabs him in the foot.
I thought he stabbed him in the foot.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not.
The face scratching must be something else.
Who scratched his face? I don't
Maybe
actually
it's
remember
Sauron later. I can't remember. Sometimes I get those two mixed up, but there's a face that's scratched at some point in some battle. But yeah, I think it's Fingolfin. He stabs him in the foot, and so after that, Morgoth walks around like with a limp, kind of, and he's real embarrassed by it.
Oh yeah, Morgoth's so tall. That's kind of why why I'm thinking like.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I don't know how he would have.
Maybe it's the eagles, because after he dies, the eagles come and rescue Fingolfin's body, and maybe it's them that scratch his face. I don't recall.
That sounds like it makes sense, but I also don't remember that. So
it might be Sauron who gets his face scratched. It's hard to keep these guys all together.
But Sauron also just loses his face, his ability to look.
Yeah, after Numenor.
Beautiful.
Yes.
But yeah, and then Finrod is definitely the communicator of the bunch.
Mm-hmm.
But he also, I feel like the reason he's willing to sacrifice himself is because he left behind his wife, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't remember if they were married or not, but he was like in love with her. Okay, maybe so.
I thought they were married. I don't know. I thought that's why he won't he's unwilling to take a wife in Beleriand, is because he left her behind. I don't remember why. I can't.
I think she just didn't want to come to Middle-earth, which right. Honestly, she knows what's up. Yeah.
But he's sort of part of the reason I think it's easier for him to sacrifice himself is because he kind of knows he's going back there.
Yeah, and I think also he knows that Beren's quest is tied to the oath of Fëanor, and so for him to help Beren get the Silmarils and in any way possible, I guess is probably kind of a part of the oath that he's tied to.
Yeah, there was no possibility of Fëanor's kids to ever actually get the Silmarillions, right? Or did they was it always a futile endeavor?
They do get two of them in the end.
But don't they fall into the earth or something?
Yeah, once they have them, it's so torturous to them that they just, one of them casts it into the sea and then one of them casts it into the earth. So
one of them disappears completely, vanishes, right?
Yeah, I get those two mixed up. It's two of the I think it's Mithras and Maglor. One of them throws it into the sea and then he just kind of wanders around the beaches afterwards, lamenting forever. And then the other one casts himself into a fiery chasm with the Silmaril, just because now that they finally have it, it's so torturous to them because the Silmarils are hallowed, and anyone who's kind of unworthy of them or doesn't have the best intentions can't hold them without it hurting them a lot.
Yeah, Tolkien loves fiery chasms.
Yeah, he does.
He loves using fiery chasms. But which of the sort of great tales are your favorite?
Oh, probably Beren and Luthien, I guess, if we're coming down to those. However, I was reading, what was it? We were just reading The Fall of Gondolin was also really intense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's hard because they're all so great.
The Children of Hurin's just so depressing.
I love it though, because it feels like a Greek tragedy where a lot of other
Yes.
stories feel more like fairy tales because they kind of have happy endings. With the Children of Hurin, it's just one thing after another, and you get to the end of that story and you're just I need to just put this book down and take a nap. it's just depressing.
Have you ever listened to it done by the Christopher Lee audiobook?
No, I haven't. I just have the box set of the books, but I haven't listened to the audio.
Gotcha. It's even more like sort of epic and dramatic with Christopher Lee.
I'm sure he's got such a strong voice. Like he would be incredible.
It's so sad that he died before he could do the Fall of Gondolin, because I would have loved to listen to the Fall of Gondolin in his voice.
That would have been incredible.
Like Fall of Gondolin is just the most epic battle that it's like Tolkien was literally like thinking. It's kind of interesting because he thinks so much like a modern like kid using like all the toys in the toy box.
He's like, let's bring it all together. Yeah,
exactly. He like, this is, that's how like even like the Marvel movies think of it. Like that's how they think. Like, but Tolkien doesn't strike me. It's so interesting. Like his like personality doesn't strike me in that same way. But his fiction kind of feels like that sometimes.
Well, I feel like the whole Silmarillion, he's like, now, like, and let me introduce you to this piece and this piece and this piece. And that's like the whole thing up until like Beren and Luthien. And then you see it starting to come together. And then after that, it just starts like snowballing. And you're like, oh, I remember this guy from this chapter. Now he's here and it all makes sense. And like everything's coming together at like super speed. And it just like hits you like crazy. And you're just like overwhelmed and it's such an incredible story. Then you see it all coming together and you have like Eärendil and then like, I don't know, that's the thing about Tolkien is you can see how everything is a part of the same great tale. Like the Silmarils come from the light of the trees, and even in the Lord of the Rings we have the Fall of Galadriel, which has the light of Eärendil inside of it, which also is from a Silmaril, which is also from the trees. Like it's just crazy.
I've always gotten confused. Where did that actually come from? Is it really explained how that exists?
The Fall of Galadriel?
Yeah.
I think what it is she has the mirror of Galadriel, and the light is reflected in the mirror in the waters of it. And I believe she like scooped some of the water and puts it in the glass. I am 90% sure.
Okay. Because I thought I was like, because it doesn't really seem to have that much to do with Eärendil.
Yeah. And it's not like they have the actual star. It's like there's the light from the star.
Yeah. Okay. So is the mirror basically the light from, it mirrors the light from the star?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, that was always confusing to me. Does he not really describe that, or am I just?
I feel like he doesn't go too far into it in the Lord of the Rings because it was written before he even had the Silmarillion really fully together. But if you would check like Tolkien Gateway, I bet it would have some kind of sources that it's probably all in Unfinished Tales.
So Elvish magic is really this interesting thing. I mean, it's the hobbits call it magic, and then sort of how where does that come from? What is that sort of the basis for it?
I feel like Elvish magic is really just a cooperation with nature, the way that like the elves have special gifts and the way that they use it is in harmony with nature. And you can see that contrasted in the way that the enemy kind of tries to contort nature and manipulate it to his own end. So you have enchantment over here, which is just like, this is the way that it was supposed to be. And this is the way that it's like properly ordered and properly used, I guess.
It's the power of natural law.
Yeah. And it's just like the elves have kind of like special gifts and this is the way that it was meant to be used. And that's the way they use it. And if they kind of try and deviate from that, that's when things go wrong.
Yeah, makes sense. What's your of the different elves, like of the different cultures of the elves, what's your which of them are your favorites, and like and then you can maybe describe that a little bit.
I think the culture of the Noldor is probably the coolest to me, because I'm a more creative person and I really enjoy making things and crafting things. And so I guess I've always been more drawn to them, which I guess could be a red flag. But I don't know, I just feel like they have the gift of creation, of sub-creation. And I feel like I really just love creating things, putting things together like that. And so they've always been something that I've been more drawn to. I've not really ever been interested in the Teleri, I'm not that into the sea. Like it just doesn't call to me in the same way that it maybe does to others. And then the other groups of elves, I've just never really, I don't know, given them a second thought. I guess it's just really all been the Noldor or nothing to me.
Yeah, I mean, they are really like Tolkien's children insofar as sub-creation goes.
Yeah. They're definitely like the favored elves.
Yeah, and the gray elves don't really do as much of that.
Yeah.
Because they're sort of the nature elves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or
I feel like, yeah, and they're more, their works are more subtle, I would say, and more like quiet, I guess, where the Noldor would be like very clamorous and loud and kind of like fiery.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So is Morgoth specifically the enemy of the elves more so than Sauron?
I would say, yeah, I mean, Morgoth is definitely like if you were to look at it in, it's not a biblical allegory, but if you were to look at it as so, Morgoth would be Satan and Sauron would be like the number one demon. So Morgoth is like much more the enemy than Sauron. Sauron is just like a lieutenant of Morgoth. But in Morgoth's absence, after he's cast into the void, I would say that Sauron is like the number one enemy. But I also don't think it's like that he's just the enemy of the elves. He's the enemy of all the children of Iluvatar. But I do think Morgoth targets the elves first and foremost because they have the most power and the most potential if corrupted, because he's going to go for whoever could serve him the most. Like it's kind of like the One Ring. If Gandalf were to take it, it would be so much worse than if Frodo takes it, because Frodo on his own just doesn't really have the capacity to do as much harm as Gandalf would.
Yeah. So yeah, okay. And then what would you, I guess, what is the void? They don't really
it doesn't
go into that at all.
It's just like it's like Morgoth is cast into the outer darkness where he will never be able to escape, allegedly. But it doesn't really describe it too much. It's just like something that's outside of the world, and is somehow impossible to escape.
Yeah, it's just interesting that it's not done earlier or anything like that.
Yeah,
like
that's what I'm like, you've had this void the whole time and you didn't put him in it like right away.
And you had him in prison for a really long time.
And then they let him out. Like, okay. Yeah, that's another example of the Valar not being perfect either, because I love how Tolkien writes that Manwë was without evil. And so he couldn't understand evil, and he couldn't understand how Morgoth, I think he was still called Melkor at the time, could be so evil. And so he was kind of naive in that sense, that he just didn't even, like, it didn't compute in his brain, like that he wouldn't actually be repentant. And so that's why he's like, well, he says he's sorry, let's let him out.
Yeah, that innocence that they sort of personify innocence, though, or I guess Manwë sort of personifies innocence in that way. And then the elves sort of all have that. It's interesting that even like the fall of who made the rings? Who was the elf?
Celebrimbor.
Yeah, Celebrimbor. Like his people still fell victim to this innocence of not seeing Sauron for what he really was. And it's interesting because even though they had such a long history of dealing with, as the Noldor, dealing with Morgoth and his doings, it's so interesting that they still fall victim to Sauron.
I also think it was probably in his pride that he wanted to learn how to become, the greatest craftsman and to make, the greatest kind of things and make these rings. And so he was like tempted to kind of take help from wherever he could get it. And when you want something so bad and then you suddenly have a guy showing up telling you he can give it to you, I imagine like with all of his pride and being a descendant of Feanor, it probably made it very difficult for him to think rationally and to put two and two together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So who is Feanor sort of the greatest of all the elves, or who would you say is the greatest of all the elves?
Yeah, I think Tolkien calls him, he at least could have been the greatest of all the elves. Like he had that potential. But unfortunately he, like through his own choices, he kind of diminished his own self by falling into evil. But I think that Feanor probably could have been the greatest of all elves. And I think Tolkien says something about when he dies, like, and then perished, the greatest of all the Noldor, the most powerful and wisest, or maybe not wise, strongest, smartest. So yeah, he definitely could have been.
Yeah.
Sad.
Yeah, very sad. The one group of elves we haven't really talked about are the ones that stayed.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the king of the
Vanyar?
Yeah, the Vanyar.
I don't know. They're kind of a group that I don't really think about that much because of the fact that they aren't really in the story that much. I think it was Ingwe who was the leader of the Vanyar, and they were the ones to come to Valinor first, and then stayed. So they're probably the smartest of all of them because they kind of just stayed out of it. But they're the ones that we don't really get too much about, just because most of the story is set in Middle-earth.
It was Feanor's mother a Vanyar, or is that somebody else? Or isn't there a wife that was a Vanyar, or a mother that was?
Yeah, that sounds right. I think Miriel was one of the Noldor, but I remember I think there are a couple of times where like one group of elves will be like, even though you're a different group of elves, you can still hang out with us because of your mother was a part of our group. But I feel like that might happen a couple of times, but I don't remember.
Did Finrod maybe marry one? Or not Finrod? Who's Finrod's mother actually?
Finrod's mother. Let me look this up.
I feel like whoever, because the blonde hair, I thought the blonde hair was from the Vanyar, if I'm not mistaken.
Eowyn was Finrod's mother, and she was the daughter of Olwe.
Oh, never mind. So she was a
Teleri.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
For some reason, I associate
there's
blonde.
So much.
For some reason, I associate blonde with the Vanyar. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think it's just because I do the same thing, and I think it's because they stay in the light of the Valar. I guess they seem like a more golden people because they don't go into the darkness that comes with Middle-earth. But I mean, Galadriel was also like had golden hair.
Yeah, that's why I was like, that's why I thought, because they have the same mother, right? Galadriel and Finrod are brother and sister. So that's why I was like thinking like, okay, they must have a Vanyar.
Yeah, there's got to be someone in there with the golden hair.
I swear there's a Vanyar mother. So somebody's married to a Vanyar.
I'm gonna have to like look this up afterwards. It's gonna drive me crazy.
But maybe I'm making this up. Maybe I'm just thinking too much about
That's
it.
the
But
thing with Tolkien, with the elves. You're like, it's almost impossible to keep everyone straight.
yeah, I'm amazed that he kept them straight. Actually, wait,
Yeah.
didn't he mess them up a few times? Isn't there like a family tree that somebody's on one version is the son of somebody, and
Yeah, I know with Gil-galad, he said that Gil-galad had a certain father and then he changed it to somewhere else. And so everyone kind of like jokes about like who's Gil-galad's dad, like because he was kind of changed. I think he changed his mind as he went. He did that with a lot of the family trees, like shuffling people around. And I guess all we have to do is like usually what I'm like, oh, if it's in the Silmarillion, that's what I'm sticking with. But then you have everything else he's written where he's maybe changed it later on in his life, and then you would argue that that's more correct. But it's a lot.
Sometimes I'm amazed The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings was even published, because I'm amazed he wasn't like moving around all the hobbits in different family trees. And I'm amazed he was able to come to a decision on that sort of thing, because he loves family trees.
Yeah.
In everything. Everyone has a long family tree.
I imagine he was very frustrated after the books were actually published, because that meant he couldn't go back and change them without changing everything.
Did Tolkien have his own headcanon? That's the real question.
Probably. Yeah. I mean, probably, yeah.
He was like changing who Bilbo and who Frodo are descendants of. In his mind,
I feel
years
like he was
after.
Yeah, like he was always just like, like moving things around, like just like tiny bits and changing things in his mind. But then once something was actually published, I guess there wasn't too much he could do to change it.
Yeah, it's hard being a perfectionist. I mean, that's really what he was. It's funny, his friend C.S. Lewis just kind of wrote it and published it and was like, yep, I'm done with it. And Tolkien was like, no, I must make it perfect.
That's how I am with everything I do. And then like my husband will just be like I feel like my husband's more of the C.S. Lewis and I'm like the Tolkien, like I have to make everything perfect. I can't, it's not done until it's just so. And then, my husband's over there like getting everything done because he'll just do it once and then it's done. Yeah. So it sounds nice to have your brain let you relax. Must be nice.
The Noldor brain versus do you think there's a elf version?
Maybe the Teleri brain, because they seem to be pretty efficient. They they make their stuff and then it's great and it's just there, it's just done. But the Noldor are always just like, I gotta tweak it and change it and make it better.
So you said Finrod and Fingolfin were your favorite elves. It's just very interesting, sort of. I don't feel like we get a lot of Fingolfin's like personality, do we?
I don't think a lot of it, but I feel like you can kind of see it through his actions, especially in his final battle with Morgoth. It's just like one of the best battles. Like, how could he not be my favorite?
Yeah. And then I think Finrod would be like my favorite of the bunch. I just think his sacrifice is so so interesting, as well as just what is it? He sort of, his downfall. He's not as caught up in what he's created being destroyed. I think a lot of the Noldor are just go above and beyond to try and stop the destruction of what they've created, but he's more okay with the fact that this is happening. He's more submissive to Providence, I guess.
He seems more aware of his role, and of what he must do. Whereas I think a lot of the elves hold on to their own creation, the work of their hands, to the point where they become unwilling to accept it. Like Turgon in Gondolin, when I forget which character comes and he's bearing the words of,
Is it Tor?
He comes I forget. It's one of the characters who almost speaks to him and gives him like a prophecy to bring to Turgon.
Is
at
it
the
Tor?
end of
Tor?
yeah, probably that sounds right.
Thorin's cousin,
Yeah.
I think.
So he comes and he's like, listen, I have the message of one of the Valar that you need to get out of here. And Turgon's like, no, sorry, like I love it here too much, and I am not willing to leave. So you see that happen kind of a lot with a lot of the elves.
Yeah, Gondolin does seem like almost the perfect city too. So it's very understandable why you wouldn't want to leave. Like all this, like
Yeah.
it's sort of the sort of greatest of heraldry, sort of. It's the greatest of the chivalry that exists probably on Middle-earth ever, because of all these different, like it's flourishing and with culture and stuff like that. Like it's just, I mean, it's based on what's the city in Valinor, the
Tyrion.
yeah, Tyrion. And then it's so interesting that like that the same design goes into Minas Tirith eventually, and it's sort of that type of city that sort of never goes away.
Yeah,
in Tolkien
and you
stories.
could see him thinking to himself, well, I've stood and remained in secret for this long, so why couldn't it last longer? And
Yeah.
so he's kind of just in his pride and you can see it's just his love of what he's made that he's unwilling to heed the warnings.
Yeah, the elves really do. It's just sort of a battle of pride, battling against pride. That's sort of the summation of what the elves have to deal with, because I mean the men have this, but they see the elves, so they, at least during the Silmarillion, they don't have as much pride, because they're literally looking at sort of these great figures, these these powerful elves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the men have such a short lifespan too that they're unable to cause as much destruction as the elves. So that's probably a good thing.
Which you could, yeah, I guess in the Age of Men though, it does seem like they can cause a lot of without elves around to destroy a bunch of stuff, to make their own decisions like that. Men sort of it sort of falls onto them to make all the craziness happen.
Yeah, they have no problem. They have no problem causing problems of their own.
Mm-hmm. It just makes me think of the steward, Denethor. He sort of does he sort of creates almost the fall of a whole kingdom, and he's just living through one, for the basic years of a human, which is kind of amazing. But elves create such a massive destruction over the course of ages.
Yeah, and it's no wonder that Numenor ended so disastrously too, because if you think about it, it's almost like they took men who are so prone to weakness and then gave them such a long time to mess around and cause more and more problems, and to, I don't know, it's almost like they've got too much time to sit around and worry or think about death, or think about how, oh, the elves get to live for so much longer, but the elves I don't think are as prone to the same problems as men.
Yeah. Well, we could probably talk about this forever, but I think we should wrap it up. Is there anything else you want to say before we go?
No, I mean, I could talk about the Silmarillion and elves forever.
So where can people find you?
So Yeah, they can find me at teawithtolkien.com, and that has links to our book club. We do a free book club a couple times a year, and we have a Discord server that you can find on our website. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at teawithtolkien.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kaitlyn, for coming on, and it's just an honor having you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So thank you, everyone, for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and have a wonderful day. Bye.